Australian Gill Hicks is a member of a tragic and exclusive club. On July 7th of 2005, Jill began her morning like she always did, hopping on a busy commuter train. On the same train, not far from her, was a suicide bomber. She barely survived the 2005 London terrorist attacks that killed 26 passengers. The blast resulted in the loss of both of her legs below the knee. Needless to say, it drastically changed her life. But instead of being consumed with bitterness, Hicks has become one of the most inspiring, powerful, and life-affirming speakers in the world. Following the attack, Hicks left her successful career in architecture and design. Now she works on initiatives aimed both at ending violent extremism and building sustainable models for peace. In 2007, she founded Mad for Peace, a nonprofit organization that connects people worldwide and encourages us to think of peace as a verb, something she believes we should all do on a daily basis. Gill Hicks joins us now from London via satellite to share her remarkable story and the courage and determination it takes to triumph over tragedy. Welcome to Full Frame.
Hello, thank you.
Talk to me about that day. What do you remember about that morning?
Quite extraordinary, really. I mean, anyone that has ever commuted in London will know of the absolute choreography that's there in the way that you move around a station and move onto a tube train and eventually get to your destination, because there is hundreds and hundreds of people in that commuter time frame every morning. And usually for me, I was a very proud workaholic who would always be at my office, sitting at my desk at 7:30 every morning. I think the thing that's really could almost drive me to the brink of insanity is to explore why was that morning so different for me? Why was July 7 so different that made me late? That I ended up boarding the same carriage at the same time as a suicide bomber, and we now know that the bomb was detonated at 10 to 9. So clearly out of any time frame that I would have normally been in. So for me, it's an extraordinary set of circumstances that led me to be in that train carriage at that same time, standing just feet from the suicide bomber.
And you say you heard the voice of death after the explosion. Explain that to our viewers.
Again, my experience was extraordinary, and we were in the carriage for approximately an hour before rescue could reach us. So from the time of the bomb going off until rescue was able to get down into the tunnel was roughly an hour. And I've really had time now to reflect on just how precious that hour was for me, because in that time frame I had the most extraordinary experience facing my own death. And death appeared to me as the most beautiful female voice. And it was only by listening to this voice that I was even aware that I'd lost both my legs, because this beautiful voice just said to me, "Jill, you don't want to live like this. You've lost both legs. Come with me, close your eyes." And as I was contemplating the beauty of going into this other place, the voice of life kicked in, and it was male and it was angry, and it said to me, "How dare you, even for a single minute, entertain the idea of not being here, because there's a lot for you to do." But I was very clear that it was my choice, that I didn't have to, that no one was making that choice for me. I got to choose whether I wanted to live or whether I wanted to pass. And in making the decision to live, it was incredible of just the calm that washed over me, and indeed somehow the know-how of what to do next to save my own life. I ended up tourniqueting the tops of my legs, lowering my breathing rate, keeping myself upright, and just focusing on my watch face. putting everything in the tube outside of my realm of vision. So I wasn't affected by what I was seeing and just focusing, waiting for rescue to get here. It was truly the most extraordinary time I've ever had, and it really gave me an insight into how precious our lives are and how much there is for us individually to be doing whilst we're here.
You mentioned this angry voice, and you know, looking at your life, to me, you could have been consumed with anger and bitterness. And you could have also thought about strangers and how that one stranger on that train impacted your life. And that would be one avenue to go down. But instead, you chose a different avenue. You sought out Andy, one of the rescuers. You went back to the hospital where people helped you on the road to recovery. Other strangers who were kind of angels in your life. Talk to me about that path, because you could have gone either road and you chose the right one, in my estimation.
I think what's really interesting is that I am angry, and I do get angrier as the years go by, but that anger I've managed to use as my motivation. So I've managed to make that a very positive source to keep me going, to keep me working in peace, to keep me wanting to make a difference. But I think what really hit me was the moment I read the ID label that was given to me when I was admitted to hospital. And it rather chillingly said, "1 unknown, estimated female." Now, those 4 words, Mike, just changed everything for me, because I just understood exactly how brilliant humanity actually is. Despite the actions of one person, there were many that risked their own lives to come and save mine, to come and save as many as they could. And to them, it didn't matter what colour my skin was, indeed if I was male or female, if I was rich or poor, if I had a faith or no faith at all. Nothing mattered other than I was a precious human being. And that's what that label said to me. And it's as if that was the greatest gift I could have received, because in reading that label, I felt completely connected to a beauty around my experience rather than the horror of my experience. And that's why I endeavoured to find everybody that was involved in my rescue, because I wanted to say, thank you for loving me. Thank you for showing me, through your actions, how I can live in my second life. And I actually have managed to track down every single person involved and given them the greatest hug and just said, thank you for everything you've given me.
It's interesting you said you are angry, and I guess maybe that feeds into the name of your nonprofit, Mad for Peace. Talk to us about the name.
Yes, right. Well, I like it a lot because it's actually an acronym for making a difference, but I like the quirkiness around, you know, it's also about being mad, and it's about being mad enough to want to do something to create positive change. And I think that for me is why I've gone into the world of peace building, because I see peace as a need for us to make an action. It's not passive in my view. It's something that we really have to do and consciously be thinking about how we do this with each other every single day.
You talked about action, and you know what's interesting to me is we think of victims after a bombing like this, and clearly you would fall into that category. But I think the other thing that I found fascinating about you is you sought out other victims and people that a lot of us wouldn't even recognize as victims. You went back to this neighborhood, this town where these bombers came from, where there's this guilt by association, where the people there were living. Talk to me about that, and not only for your healing, but the healing of that town. Why was that journey so important?
For me, it was absolutely vital, because I immediately felt when I was in hospital that I needed to understand. I looked at the picture of this 19-year-old suicide bomber, and I just felt I need to understand why he and the 3 other colleagues have done this action. I need to understand because I need to make a difference and to do everything possible to be part of the solution for this never to happen again. So I went to the source, and what I found was a community absolutely grieving and themselves at a complete loss as to how this had happened in their town with their boys. And I worked very closely with them, I sat with them, and I said to the community leaders, what is it we can do? Because we need to work together. This is the only way I can see that we will have a complete strength and find a solution by working together. And wonderfully, actually, just one of the ideas I almost flippantly just put on the table was, how about I recreate the journey that those bombers took coming from the north of England right down to London? And how about I walk that journey? And I almost said it as a bit of a joke, but unanimously around this table, all the community leaders completely agreed and said, that would be amazing. So I ended up walking on prosthetic legs from the top of England down to London, and it took about a month on the road, and I walked through 22 towns and cities. And my message was, please, for anyone that you feel that you are opposing their ideas or that you think that you are very different from, come and walk and talk to each other for a mile. And I guarantee you, at the end of a mile, even if you don't agree, you can agree to disagree. And what I found over and over again was this brilliance of humanity, that people came together, people were having the tough conversations with each other, and it was remarkable. They met as strangers and left as friends. So it was a project that was absolutely astounding. I don't think I'll do it again. It took me 6 months to recover, but we need to keep things fresh. So I don't think I'll be walking that route anytime soon.
As you work with this initiative, clearly you have to see what's happened in Brussels and Paris, Baghdad, San Bernardino. Do you get discouraged, or do you look at the impact you're having and the small victories along the way?
It's very hard, Mike. I've gone into a world where it is very difficult to measure success. How do you measure success of peace, of peacefulness, when we turn on our news and see these atrocities happening throughout the world? The only thing I think that keeps me going is that there are more of us in the world than there are of those who are following such a destructive ideology. And if we can reach out to each other and stand very strongly, united, shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart, I really do believe that we can not only just face this, but we will see the other side of terrorism. This is an ideology based on power, based on the idea of promise and purpose. So my job is to then say, how do we find the other ideas? How do we find the positive ideology that we can all rally around and follow that and not meet hatred with hatred?
But that seems to be the direction where a lot of people are headed. And I know you say it's important, choice is important, choose choice, the power of choice. Talk to me about that.
Again, stemming back from my experience in the carriage, what I've really come to understand is that we may not be able to control the events in our lives or in the world, but what we can control is how we react and respond. So our choice is our power. No one can ever take our choice. And I think that tapping back into that, reminding ourselves of the incredible power we have as individuals in choosing how we react, how we respond, is actually quite transformational.
Have you run into people who say, no, no, you're wrong, you know, the only way you got to meet force with force? I mean, do you get the argument, that counter argument?
All the time, all the time. And that's because people are passionate about this. People are angry. You know, we are living in a whole new world that actually fear is growing exponentially day by day, and no one knows. This is the power of terrorism in its complete random ability to make us feel very unsafe. And that's why I have to come back to, you can't use military against an ideology. An ideology lives in the mind, lives in people's hearts, and we have to look at how we are reacting and responding to the very, very destructive ideology that can be born and grow anywhere in the world.
It's not just the mental side of you thinking all of this stuff. It's the physical side of you that's also unbelievable. I mean, you take on these physical challenges to support charities. Talk to our viewers about some of the things you've done, which are beyond belief.
Well, last year was the 10th anniversary of the London bombings, and I talk a lot about these subjects. It's a very complex topic, but I just felt to commemorate the 10th anniversary, I didn't really want to say a single word. I wanted my body to speak the volumes, and so I decided that I would actually embark on 10 different challenges to commemorate each year since the bombings, and to look at really pushing myself of what could I physically do that would put me in my sort of out of my comfort zone quite a bit. And one of those things was abseiling down, you know, tall buildings. And Mike, it was absolutely terrifying. I've got no idea how people do this for sport or for fun, because the moment I landed on the ground, I just kissed that concrete, just so happy to be back down. But I learnt how to tap dance. I released a song on iTunes. I did everything that would put me in a different category of, this feels uncomfortable and I'm frightened, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay, and you're also modest, because you didn't mention firewalking, swimming with sharks, bungee jumping, race car driving, stair climbing, many more to come. Too many to list here, but you can also sing. You sang a song about peace. I want to tell you, with Gary Burroughs, that happens to be John Lennon's cousin. We're going to leave everybody with a clip from that. Can you just do a setup for us before we go?
It was a song that was written, so I'd met Gary in Australia, and Gary said, you know, I've been listening to you talk about peace, and I've written a song, and I think it's something you need to sing. And it was interesting because I used to sing prior to the bombings, but I'd lost all my lung capacity, I'd lost the ability to talk, and I've lost a lot of my hearing. So I just thought, okay, singing is something that I'm never going to do again, and I'll just move on. And then Gary presented this song, and I heard it, and I said, okay, perhaps I'll give it a go. So I went into the studio, and I was absolutely overcome by emotion of being back in a studio, of hearing the music, and out it came. So this was the first time I'd sung in 10 years since the bombings, and it was a very, very emotional time.
Let's listen.
Yes, the people of this world. Yes, every boy and every girl. Help our mission to succeed. Tell every leader to take heed. today.
One bit of advice as I say goodbye: spend more time in the studio, less time with the Sharks. It's probably a little bit easier. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with this week's Full Frame Close-Up.